Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom on a Thursday. Per usual, we're going to talk a couple big additions for the Michigan athletic department. Michigan football, Michigan basketball, both making big additions in the transfer portal this week. We will also talk later on about the potential best case, worst case for Michigan football this fall. But before we get into it, make sure to like this video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to add people there. And head to thewolverine.com. Premium access to our message board. $1 right now for 3 months or $49.99 for the entire year. So that annual deal is 50% off. And then $1 for 3 months is, I think, 90% off or more. So go and join right now. We are brought to you by My Perfect Franchise. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job? Wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Well, Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner himself and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. So Andy Luedecke, hit him up, www.myperfectfranchise.net is the website, and the people on YouTube can see the site pulled up there on the screen. On the phone at 404-973-9901. Email him, Andy@myperfectfranchise.net. And also on the website, you can book a time with him on his calendar. So thank you to My Perfect Franchise for being our sponsor today. We're also brought to you by our very own Michigan Football Preview Magazine. 160 pages, glossy pages of information, analysis, exclusive interviews, all that being worked on right now. We have a flash sale going on. If you pre-order using the code
flash you.
What's that?
We will flash you.
We will flash you if you take part in this sale.
We're trying to move product here. We're not trying to get put on some kind of government watch list.
That's right.
Sorry.
Go to the WolverineOnDemand.com. Use the promo code SAVE13, SAVE13, to save $13. It's also in our articles at the bottom. It is also on our Twitter page as well, the Wolverine on 3. So plenty of ways to find that deal, but 160 pages of goodness there heading into the Michigan football season. And we will stick with Michigan football as we start out here on today's show, talking about Josh Wallace from UMass, former standout cornerback there, 3-time team captain. He's played over 2,000 defensive snaps, over 39 games in 4 seasons for the Minutemen. Don Brown, his head coach last season. Of course, tough season for UMass. It's been a tough few seasons for them, but Josh Wallace, one of their better players. He was the number 54 cornerback in the transfer portal, number 12 overall in the top-ranked corner among guys who were uncommitted coming into his commitment there. And this is just more depth, potentially a starter to add opposite of Will Johnson. And one stat that stood out to me about Josh Wallace when we talk about what he does well, and talking to 2 different analysts that have watched him play and watched his film, is that he's a ball hawk. And on 3, Clark Brooks is our analyst there who breaks down the transfer portal, and they have this stat called ball hawk rate, amount of pass breakups per targets down the field. He was tied for the best ball hawk rate in the country among transfers this offseason with Fentrell Cypress II, who Michigan was in on earlier on in the process. He ends up going to Florida State from Virginia, but I think that's significant. Level of play is going to be a step up, but a nice addition for Michigan out of the transfer portal.
Yeah, I like it. You know what? People can say he was a plan D or whatever they want to, and that might be the case. But guys have got to be, guys have got to be on their game to play in that defense, that Don Brown defense. Those corners do. So that he's gotten a lot of balls thrown at him. He's going to be on an island. I doubt that he is lacking for confidence because of it. So, and they liked what they saw on film. So I know Clay talked to some guys at UMass who said that the kid is a player. So extremely smart and seems like another great fit. That's what I love about these portal additions, is that these guys are all cultural fits, and they are not revamping the roster. They are just adding to the roster and complementing what they have and giving guys opportunities to compete. And basically, you know what? There are no freebies here at Michigan, and that's what all these guys on the team understand. You know, they aren't, well, if this guy comes in the portal, then I'm leaving. You know, kind of like a Frankie Collins type of thing on the basketball side. They understand that competition matters, and that's what's going to make them better. So I like the addition. We'll see how good he is, but he had some big-time offers. So it's clear that this wasn't any kind of a reach. He's going to have an opportunity to come in here and play.
It's huge for them because, you know, you're already facing a situation where you have questions about your number 2 cornerback job. You have, I mean, like it or not, there are going to be some health questions with Will Johnson because he's coming off off-season knee surgery. So Will Johnson or not, the guys behind Johnson only had about 44 snaps, I think it was, of experience behind, you know, just playing games. So I believe that Wallace has played about 2,300 college snaps. There's so many numbers bouncing around my head. We're working on this football preview, but you know, he's played a lot of football, played in 39 games. I think at the very least is just a body that you've added to the room to, you know, kind of augment the competition. You know, Jaden McBurrows, Amorian Walker obviously is still someone they hold in high regard, though I think that's probably going to be a little more of a long-term project. But, you know, at worst, it's a good depth piece. And at best, you have your number 2 cornerback, which is huge. And I think the ball hawk thing is important here because, you know, what's something we've been talking about the last few seasons with this Michigan defense is that they do a good job kind of suffocating you, but they don't force enough turnovers, namely on the back end. And if you have a guy back there that has a knack for, you know, getting in there and breaking up passes or knocking a ball out loose, you know, in the run game, that's just another weapon in your arsenal for a defense we already expect to be pretty good. So there are zero downsides to adding Wallace. All it does is help your team. You know, he's a 2-time captain. Pretty much all these guys that they've brought in, that's 9 transfers now, are going to factor in on the 2-deep depth chart. It felt like even dating back to January that this is probably a position group they needed to add someone to. And now that they have, you look up and down this roster and, you know, there are position groups that have more questions than others, but I don't know if there's one where I could truly say is that there's a true deficiency or weakness, which is huge for them.
Yeah, this has been the biggest need ever since DJ Turner and Jamon Green decided to go to the NFL. And it was the last need that Michigan filled, but better late than never. And yeah, the ball hawk thing, 24 pass breakups. He only has 3 picks, but 24 pass breakups in his career, pretty significant there. And then CB, you mentioned the culture fit too. And I talked about him being a former team captain 3 times over, which is huge. I mean, when you're a captain as a sophomore too on your team, but by my count, that's 5 now of the 9 guys that Michigan has brought in through the transfer portal were team captains elsewhere. Drake Nugent, AJ Barner, Jack Tuttle, Josh Wallace, and Ladarius Henderson. It's pretty ridiculous. I mean, how many team captains are there in college football? 400, 500? I mean,
yeah, it matters. It absolutely matters, Clay. Yeah. And so I love that about him. Yeah, he's got a swag to him, man, which is what you need at that position too. So everything about him I like. So I think this is probably it for the portal. You know, what if somebody pops up, you know, at a position of need, say an elite wide receiver decided he wanted to come, I think they'd take a look at it. But
sure.
Yeah, I think overall, I think that this is going to be it. And I like the team going into 2023, guys. I really do.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's if somebody pops up, like in August, even during training camp, like we saw last year with the Abioki, you take him. But it looks like right now you're sitting at 101 guys who are either projected to be on quote-unquote scholarship or have been in the past. I think you're pretty good there, and somehow they're going to make those numbers work, obviously, as we've talked about in the past. Gun to your guys' head on September 2nd against East Carolina. Who's starting at corner across the field from Will Johnson? And maybe next to Mike Sainer still, who will obviously be the nickel.
Yeah, great question. You know what? I'm going to go with Jaden McBurrows in the upset. I think he had a good spring. I think eventually Jair Hill is going to be the guy. You know, from what I've seen and heard about him, I think by the end of the year, you know, and I'm not writing off Amorian Walker, but it's clear that he was much more raw than even the true freshman early enrollee. in Jair Hill, and it's probably because he's been playing the position longer. Hill, that's been his position, and that's what he does. So I'm going to go with somebody like McBurrows, and hopefully Will Johnson is healthy enough for the opener. There have been some questions there. He said maybe I'll play a little sparingly in the first couple games or something like that, but they'll be able to get away with it either way. So I'm gonna put that out there and say maybe McBurrows is the guy.
Assuming good health, I would also go with McBurrows. I think he's a guy that they've been everyone's kind of been chomping at the bit to see what he can do, because every time we talk to, it seems like these wide receivers in the off season or in spring ball, whatever it is, we always ask, who's the guy that gives you the most problems, at the line of scrimmage. And oftentimes those guys will say McBurrows. So I feel like if he stays healthy, I like him there. Again, all Josh Wallace does is raise everyone's level. So if it's Josh Wallace, great. What you have there. But like I said, I think that Jaden McBurrows, assuming good health, I'm actually surprised it wasn't more hyped in spring ball about that number 2 job. Most of the discussion revolved around Amorian Walker being a unicorn. And I think some of that might have been, I won't say manipulative, but they're trying to get him in a certain direction where he might make the biggest impact. But I'll go with McBurrows in that opener.
Yeah, I would use another M word, motivational. Yeah.
Those two things, and some of it, I'll blame the media. We ask more about Amorian Walker. He's a guy who made a position switch. He's a guy that was called a unicorn, so I guess that's on them. So there was quite a bit of hype there early on in the spring. I'm going to go with Josh Wallace to start the first game, but I agree with you, CB. But whether it's this year or his sophomore year, I really like Jair Hill, but I like Jaden McBurrows as well. And I think Amorian Walker could come around. Jim Harbaugh, before they got Wallace, predicted once again, and I don't want to say doubled down, but, did reaffirm what he thinks about Amorian Walker, predicted that he will be the starter opposite of Will Johnson. So there are options there. Not a ton of experience, but Josh Wallace adds that now to this room. And we'll see how he kind of acclimates, and I would assume he joins the team very soon here and then is rolling in fall camp. Anything else before we move over to basketball? We will talk a little bit more football at the end, as we mentioned, but should we get into Olivier Nkamhoua?
Let's go to Nkamhoua, man. Boy, coming out of nowhere, huh? Coming back from the dead, as you like to put your little gift there.
It's like the Undertaker, man. Juwan Howard, Photoshop his face on there. He gets out of the casket. Incredible. So plenty of twists and turns in this one, as we've talked about for 6 weeks. Michigan was the leader here. Then he goes through the NBA draft process, as he was intending on doing, goes to the G League elite camp, does not earn a combine invite, NBA combine, pulls out of the draft on May 31. And okay, now there seems to be a recruitment. He starts to set visits. Michigan's one of them. Baylor, West Virginia, Kansas State, right in that mix. Then on Monday, there are reports, okay, Michigan's out of it here. This is going to be West Virginia and Baylor. Less than 24 hours later, Michigan is back in it and appeared to be the leader. And then 12 hours after that, he ends up a Michigan Wolverine. And I don't think it's any coincidence that they signed him and announced him immediately after that as well. So good on Tom Wyrot, the communications guy over there, for getting that one done with the press release. But, man, and it just tells you, is we talked about this on Monday, because things didn't look good when we were on our live show at 6 p.m. when the news had just dropped. But it's never over until it's over, until a guy is signed. So this one is over now. But Olivier Nkamhoua, 6'9", 236-pound forward out of Tennessee, averaged nearly 11 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists per game last season, shot 55% from inside the arc, 33.3% on 54 three-point attempts. And my favorite thing, 70.8% at the rim. Fellas, a big addition for Juwan Howard and company. It was 6-7 weeks in the making. Didn't look good at one point, but Olivier Nkamhoua is a Michigan Wolverine.
Yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence that they had every other ducks in a row to announce this right away. Let's put it that way. I think they expected it initially, and then, you know what, things come up, and you've got different guys in your camp that want different things. I think Andrew Slater, one of the analysts out there, put it out there. He wanted Michigan. Somebody else maybe was more interested in NIL. Maybe somebody else was closer to another coach. And you know what? The kid won out, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So, and I do believe he will get some NIL opportunities. Do I think Michigan threw a huge bag at him to land him? No, I do not. I do think that there is still some work to do there, and they still aren't going to be doing the pay-for-play thing where they're going to get into bidding wars. But if you can provide opportunities, as we're seeing in football, then you're going to have an opportunity, especially if you win. That's what's really kind of keeping Michigan afloat. You've still got too few guys carrying the water for NIL at Michigan right now, and basketball needs more help, flat out. So, however, this is a huge get, and if you get one more guy, I know there's been a lot of buzz about Antonio Reeves from Kentucky, and I don't think the smoke there. There's some smoke, but I still think that one's very fluid. But Michigan's in the mix there. If it comes down to NIL, I don't think Michigan wins that battle, but these guys want to play too, right? If Nkamhoua were to have gone to West Virginia or Baylor, they've got more depth there than they do at Michigan. He understands that he's going to get some minutes, and we should say right now, this kid's not the world beater. He's not going to go out there and score 20 points a game and get you 10 rebounds, but he is a great piece. He understands the game, as Juwan Howard said in the release, much better passer than given credit for. And more importantly, man, there was a void there last year, and I think he's going to be the guy to fill it. So huge get for Michigan basketball as they try to get back to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, really that void at the 4 has been there for the last 2 years. I mean, they didn't get what they thought they should have out of Brandon Johns last year. Obviously, the issues with Terrence Williams and Will Cheddar last year. But, yeah, this is a big deal for them. And really quick tangent on this whole situation. I think that Nkamhoua is already 23. I think he'll be 24 at some point next season. He's an adult. Like, why is anyone else influencing this decision? And you have, again, you're still a young man. I'm not a star athlete, but you seek the input of those with life experience and adults and people in your life will steer you or counsel you in a certain direction. But, when you see the stuff about, factor A was this, factor B was this, and this was pulling him in one direction, this was pulling him in another. Stop. Like, let him make the decision. It ultimately is his future and what he chooses to invest in. But yeah, you look at what he brings to the table. I mean, we were in a dark place earlier this week when you're sitting here thinking that there's no way this guy's coming now. I mean, Michigan's been eliminated from consideration. Whatever happened at the 11th hour, they swoop back in, and all of a sudden you have a guy that, the factors that needed to be important and leaned on ultimately were. And now you have a guy that's going to start at the 4, can probably play a little bit of backup 5 for you, which I don't know if that's, I think you still need to maybe address that through the portal. But, I think that we know that Juwan likes to run the offense through his big guys. I think that Nkamhoua is, I know I watched him put up 27 points against Duke. I think to expect him to do that night in and night out would be, pretty lofty. But I think this is a guy that, all of a sudden you look at what this starting 5 could look like. And I'm just spitballing here, but, I think you could do a lot worse than a starting 5 that has Doug McDaniel, Namari Burnett, Nkamhoua, Terrace Reed, and we'll see who emerges at the 3. Maybe there's another guard you go out there and get, and Burnett plays the 3, or Yusuf Khayat steps up, and you still have Trey Jackson and Terrence Williams, and you have some options. But again, we'll see if this ultimately moves the needle in a big way for them to get back to where we think they should be in the NCAA tournament. But I think at the very least, we talk about how Josh Wallace's addition raised the floor of the cornerback room at Michigan. I think that having Nkamhoua, a guy that's proven to be an asset at the college level, it just raises. You don't want to be one of those Wednesday night teams in the Big Ten tournament, right? I think that's kind of the line here. So we'll see. There's still some work to do. A couple spots up for grabs here, but they had to have him, and thank goodness they got him, because I don't know where they would have gone if they didn't.
Yeah. And the biggest thing, too, with Nkamhoua, talking to Grant Ramey, who covers Tennessee for VolQuest, is one, he's going to add, I think he is 23 years old. And I'm happy for him that his wishes won out here. He wanted to come, play for Juwan Howard, play for Michigan, get developed, and eventually become a pro. But he adds, he's a great culture fit, too. We talked about it on the football side with Josh Wallace, but watch an interview of Olivier Nkamhoua, just how mature, thoughtful he is. So I think that's going to be a fantastic fit. And we've talked about culture the last 2 years being an issue with these Michigan basketball teams, or maybe chemistry would be a better way to put it. I think Olivier Nkamhoua is going to help in that department. Now, one thing on the floor is he is a very inconsistent player. We all saw what he did against Duke, and then he completely disappeared in the Sweet 16 against FAU. I forget how many minutes he played, but, essentially wasn't even a factor in that game. Last year, he had 17 double-digit scoring efforts. He had 5 games of 20-plus points, including that Duke game. He also had 8 games with 6 or fewer points, plenty in the single digits there. And then he basically just kind of falls out of the rotation in a game, and then you come back the next game, see what he can give you. But he's going to get better, and I think with, a different lineup around him, could be potentially better this season and more consistent, and Juwan Howard will work with him. And I think that's something that he's really excited about. And then I was thinking about this because we had a question on the message board over at thewolverine.com is, when was last time Michigan had a 4-man like this? Because John Beilein approached it a different way. I mean, you look back at some of their 4s. It was Zach Irvin, Duncan Robinson. Now, there was the DJ Wilson year in there when he started alongside Mo Wagner in 2017. Lately, you've had some bigger options like a Musa Diabate, but then you've also had, he couldn't shoot. So this is a guy
Isaiah Livers.
Yeah, but this is more of a post-up guy to me than, right. Livers wasn't going to live in the post.
Right.
I think the last time they've had a guy like this is DJ Wilson. Now, DJ might have been better and a better shooter, but the athleticism here I think is big. What are your guys' thoughts on kind of where their approach is now at this 4 spot?
Yeah, I think it's better than Diabate and Hunter Dickinson out there at the same time together when it got clunky, right? Because I think he's multifaceted. I think Nkamhoua can step out, and I think he can play inside. Obviously, he scored, like you said, 70.8%, I think, around the rim is absolutely huge, So that's what I love about it. And again, you've got another option. I think Terrence Williams is going to bounce back and have a solid year. I really do. I think as a backup, he's not the guy that you want to be your starter, but I think he's much better than he's shown. And we've seen it from him. Last year was a complete disaster for him, obviously, and he lost some of his confidence. But and then don't forget about Trey Jackson as well, So now they've got bodies and they've got guys that are going to compete. So it'll be interesting to see how it meshes. I can't imagine it's not going to be better than last year, right? There were some issues there, some chemistry issues, and you saw it on the floor in the body language. If a guy didn't box out, you had guys throwing their hands up, you had guys pointing at other guys and things like that. So I don't anticipate that's going to be an issue this year. So, and when you look at that, again, when you look at that depth chart, guys, or that scholarship chart, there are a lot of guys in there that were top 100 guys. Okay. There's talent on this team. Namari Burnett has yet to reach his peak, and he's been injured, obviously, but I think he's better than he's shown, and he's a good defender. I think it's going to be a better defensive team. I think you've got guys that are willing to buy in much more than some guys last year who didn't give a damn about defense. It was about getting their shots, and whatever. So Yusuf Hayat, I can't wait to see, if he's improved. Talking to Phil Martelli, Michigan's associate head coach this year, about him, he said he's got more to give. He says he wouldn't call him a consistent shooter. He said he's a little streaky at times, but he said the kid wants it so badly. And I see a roster full of those guys. And to me, those are the kinds of teams that can overachieve.
Yeah. As far as the approach goes, you look at I feel like there's more skill in that forward rotation now. At center, obviously we talk about how they need a backup 5 still, but now it feels like you have guys that you kind of mix and match a little bit. And I guess to a certain extent, you can do that with Terrence Williams and Will Cheddar, but let's be honest here. I mean, neither of them really had anything that you can really hang your hat on as, okay, this is what he brings to the table. I mean, Nkamhoua, it's an inconsistent skill set, but there is some offensive skills there. I like the length that Trey Jackson has. I like, at the 5, I like that Terrace Reed moves well for a player that size. All of a sudden to me, it just kind of, what was a big question when Hunter Dickinson left now kind of moves, to the other side of the lineup where, okay, are you going to have enough from the guard spots? Are you going to have enough on the wing? I don't know that yet. And like Chris said, there's a lot of talent, a lot of talent here still. That 2021 class was kind of supposed to be the one that took this thing to the next level, but that wasn't the case. And all of a sudden, you have Moussa Diabate, Caleb Houston are gone. Frankie Collins transfers out. Kobe Buffkin's off to the NBA now. So there's not, Isaiah Barnes is gone. So really, you're looking at Will Cheddar to kind of emerge from that and be, if nothing else, just be a good bench, piece off the bench. But, from there, again, I just, the pieces on the roster in general, I like, I've said it from the start. I don't know that there's a certain archetype of guy that they needed to hone in on. I think they just needed to find a couple good basketball players and increase the competition. And, maybe some new blood changes the chemistry a bit. And, so far you look at Namari Burnett and Olivier Nkamhoua. I think that those are two guys that, are going to kind of be adults in the room too. I know Burnett hasn't played a ton of basketball because of injuries and he's moved around a little bit, but you finally have some adults in the room that you would hope will be some of your leaders next year. So that's just kind of my overview on where it is in general.
Yeah, and when you look at this roster, which isn't necessarily complete, it could be at this point too with Nkamhoua, is most of his touches are going to come in the post, but as Chris, you mentioned, and Jawan pointed out too, his passing is really intriguing to me. He had a really high assist rate last year, averaged 2 assists per game, so it's not going to get stuck in there. And when Terrace Reed, he needs to come along quite a bit offensively. When that's the case there, I mean, I think you do have a veteran presence now in the front court. You have Trey Jackson, you have Namari Burnett. Now I'm going to do another gun to your head question. If this is the 11 that Michigan rolls out with this coming winter, what's your starting lineup at this point projected in June?
Yeah. Well, I think Nkamhoua, Reed, and then McDaniel, Burnett, and then the 3. Man, that's a toughie. Do you play Burnett at the 3? Does George Washington come out of nowhere as your 2 and light it up? I don't think so. So that's what I don't know. That's to me, which is why they're still going after a guy like Antonio Reeves, right? They need one more guard there, and if they can get somebody like that, then you're looking at a team that can vie for the tournament. So, and it sounds like he's an option. Again, it depends on what he's looking for. Is he going to be a guy like Nkamhoua, who doesn't necessarily need to go to the highest bidder? Is he going to be a guy who, like Burnett, who was looking for the right fit and, found it? So he's going to get his NIL opportunities too. Just, it's just not going to be a bag thrown at him. So those 4 and one other, how's that? Is that a cop out?
You got a starting 4.
We got a starting 4. So
considering they've been playing 4-on-5 the last few years anyways.
Right.
They've got a power forward. I think it works. No,
maybe Youssef steps up, right? We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, right now I would say, I think McDaniel, Nkamhoua, Reed are locks. I think Namari Burnett is probably close to a lock at this point, depending on who else they bring in. But it's a matter of, Jalen Llewellyn's back? Do you start him and play him off the ball, and then Burnett's playing ready? 3, or will he
be ready? Right.
Yeah. Will he even be ready for that? So, gun to my head, I would say McDaniel, Burnett, Youssef, Nkamhoua, Reed. Would be where I would go with that right now. So
okay, I have the same 4 as you guys. I would plug in Trey Jackson at the 3, and I think we forget too that Terrence Williams played the 3 to start his career. His first couple seasons, he could do that. So you do have some options. I do think you need either a wing. I mean, Antonio Reeves would be, I think, a great pickup for what this team needs, because then you're really thin in the backcourt. But if you can allow Namari Burnett to stay in the backcourt by getting another wing, then I think that fills that problem too. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Will Antonio Reeves even graduate and enter the transfer portal? I do love how there's this much talk surrounding him, and rightfully so. It's people started with people from Kentucky, but going to be interesting to see what happens. Let's finish off very quickly with some football talk. AB, you had a great article, I believe yesterday, but at some point this week, talking about the best case scenario for Michigan this fall, the worst case scenario for Michigan this fall on the football side of things. So we can let you start, but let's start with the best case. I think we're all going to have a similar answer to this one, but where do you see the best case scenario for Michigan being?
Yeah, I mean, there's an important distinction here. Is it best case as in this is what we're all rooting for, or best case in terms of what I think the team's capable of. And that's the way I chose to frame this.
Yeah.
The best case, I think, is that they can win them all and win this national title this year. I think that the sky's the limit. I think that you go back and you look at all the guys that decided to return. You add the transfers into the mix, add in some young up-and-comers, some new blood into the mix, new blood on the coaching staff. Georgia is rightfully probably the favorite to win it, just given what they've done the last few years, and they've kind of supplanted Alabama in terms of the football factory, so to speak. Though I think Bama will remain in the mix, but we've talked about this before. Michigan just has less questions than a lot of those teams, around them in the Vegas odds, in the computer rankings. I don't care what the computers say. Last 2 years, the computers have given Michigan like a 20% chance to beat Ohio State. And, given the way that both of those games went, I think you could make the argument that maybe the computers should have had it flipped. So for me, best case scenario, this is a team that can do everything that it says it can.
Yeah, you know what? You'll care more about the what the computers think when we're subservient to them here in about 100 years when AI takes over. So, yeah. But I will say that, best case, that's, ditto is all I can say. There's no question that this team can win every game on the schedule, assuming everybody stays healthy. Say JJ McCarthy were to go down, that would be horrible. And then you're adjusting your basically your projections. I still think they could win most games on the schedule, depending on how the backup quarterback plays, if you've got, with the running backs they have and everything else. But he is by far the most important player to stay healthy this year. I don't think there's any question about it. So, but they won't be tested until week 6, I think. They go to Nebraska in week 5, and maybe if Nebraska plays above its head, we know that's a tough place to play. Minnesota, I think, could be a tricky one. But you know what? I think the worst case scenario, I'll bring that up right now, guys, is maybe you get banged up or something like that. Maybe you lose to Penn State, and then you lose to Ohio State, and you don't even make the Big Ten championship game. So I think that's certainly a possibility. People will say, oh, there's no way that can happen. Well, sure it can. Those are talented football teams. You play one on the road in an extremely tough environment, and Ohio State's going to be out for blood. So, and that's a talented football team. So, do I expect it? No. If we do the gun to my head thing again, I'd say Michigan's going to be your Big Ten champion. So at the same time, I think that's the worst case scenario. I don't see them losing any of the other games on the schedule unless somebody sneaks up on them, or maybe eight reviews go against them at Minnesota or something like that. And there are some questions.
That would never happen.
That would never happen.
Never happen. Not once.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gun to your head thing is going to become a new segment, I think. But
there you have it.
I'm going to go best case. They're lifting that trophy January 8th, 2024 in Houston at NRG Stadium. And I think that could happen for this Michigan team. I don't think that's a huge bombshell or anything. I'm in AB. You had, I'll spoil it, I guess, 9-3 as a worst case. I'm maybe a little bit more of like, hey, anything can happen. I mean, I got like 7-5 is my worst case. I mean, you could have some injuries. You drop one you shouldn't. We're talking worst case here.
Right.
You drop one you shouldn't. I'm thinking, doubts start to creep in like 2007 season. They turned things around, but it was too little too late to really salvage a special season. That Nebraska-Minnesota stretch, maybe you drop one. You lose at Michigan State. Maryland, is a tough one. Penn State, Ohio State, we know are going to be challenging. So that's my worst case. I don't think that'll happen or anything close to it. I think Michigan will win 10-plus games, and I would even hit the over on the 10.5, which Vegas has it at. But am I crazy for thinking they could lose 5 games somehow?
No, you're not. If we look at 2005, like you said, go back to then, 2005 even, when Mike Hart got hurt, and then, everybody else got hurt, and Jake Long got hurt, and it could be tough. Yeah, Carlos Brown. So, but you know what? Yeah, I mean, that it would take a lot to get there, I think. But
I agree.
Certainly, not out of the realm of possibility. And of course, we hope to God that doesn't happen. That means that something happened to JJ, something probably happened to Blake Corum too. So, let's not even talk like that.
Well, for the purposes of the exercise, I mean, I'll say that I said 9-3 is the worst case simply because, like, I think it's the most realistic, quote unquote, worst case scenario. Obviously, you think back to 2007, they go 8-4 that year. or 9-4, including the bowl win. You just never know what can happen. I feel like this team is too. I think the player leadership is too good. I think that they are too competently coached to probably be, unless there's a devastating injury, to be anything worse than 9-3. I'll move real quick to what I think would be, 9-3 would be frustrating because it means you're probably going to like Orlando or Jacksonville to cover a bowl game that nobody cares about. Everyone, the guys that can would opt out of it, and that would be frustrating. I think the most frustrating though would be one of those 10-2 type of seasons where, let's just say, you lose to Michigan or to Penn State, lose to Ohio State. You're sitting at 10-2, which is like 10 wins by most metrics would be okay. You had a pretty good year, and it could still be a pretty good year because sometimes things just don't go your way. You have a couple of those coin flips in there, but you'd probably still be in a New Year's Six bowl, but nobody wants that. And there are the diehards that will take that and they will travel wherever because it's Michigan football. I wouldn't be fired up about that. I mean, this is a college football playoff. This is at least college football playoff or bust for me. So to kind of revert back to what those 2016 through 2018, 2019 was, where you win 10 games but you lose to your two best opponents on the schedule, and you kind of just don't have anything to show for a double-digit season. That would be, to me, the most frustrating. Not the worst case scenario, but the most frustrating, especially because, when you talk about worst case, we know that there's probably a bad break that somewhere, there's a lot of injuries. You can kind of explain those away. But if this group as constructed went 10-2, that would be very, very frustrating.
It's a good point. And it's on the table. And that's why we were talking about this in our chat today. I think there is pressure on this team that they've put on themselves to win, because you have the roster, you have the pieces, you have the coaching staff, and you don't know how long that's going to last. I mean, there are going to be a lot of guys that go pro after this season. You could get some back, but this team, as currently constructed, as you said, is really, really high level, and maybe as good as it'll get in a long time. Maybe that doesn't mean they finish 12-0 again like they did last season. That's why, the pressure is there to go seize this opportunity when they have it. But that would be frustrating, I think, and even more frustrating probably would be the Gator Bowl scenario you laid out, being out in Jacksonville. I can just picture it's drizzling, raining on January 1 or whatever. But yeah, so don't go 7-5, don't go 8-4 at the very least, I would say. Anything else on Michigan's best case, worst case, most frustrating case?
Let's wrap her up.
All right, that is going to be our show for this week. Remember to join us over at thewolverine.com. We got a $1 deal for 3 months going on right now. Also, a year costs you just $49.99, so that is half off. All of our premium access. Get on the message board there with other Michigan fans. Make sure to like this video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel as well. And the last plug, to head to thewolverineondemand.com. Use the promo code SAVE13 to get $13 off of our 160-page Michigan football preview magazine. Pre-order yours right now. It'll show up at your door in July. You're going to want to do it anyway, so save the $13, and we will see everyone next time.